Access main program. Access main security. Access main program grid.
Access granted.
But, man, I mean, just what can, after all of this, all this time, what can you honestly say about this movie that hasn't been said already? So, as I was asked by Trauma Dom several times, especially at the beginning of this film here, I was posed the question, what would I classify this movie as? And to me, as far as I'm concerned, this movie is undoubtedly, unquestionably a horror film. Let's take a look at how, and it all comes down to the presentation. Let's look at the slow burn with the dinosaur reveal, which to me, that's classic movie monster setup, and you can't even deny that. The first time you see the raptor, it's being transported in a cage, and everything is really ominous. And when you see it, like you see the light source behind the trees and the leaves like shuffling around, you think that it's an actual dinosaur, but it's just a cage. But still, that's building anticipation and a sense of tension and suspense. And even within the kennel, the raptor still manages to wreak havoc. Going so far as not only to push its cage backwards on the rail, but also manage to take a snack with him with the black guy that it devoured. Next, they're being fed. Or no, you see it in baby form first, but then afterwards, the raptors are being fed, still within an enclosure, concealed within containment, and all you hear is how ravenous these things are from the blood-curdling shrieks of a cow. By the time we get to actually seeing it up close and personal, I mean, the bird of prey expert of all people has them in his sights with a shotgun, staring down the barrel. He's got it in its sights. The hunter becomes the hunted, and you finally realize how dangerous these things are. I mean, that thing made ground beef out of Crocodile Dundee. Too right, mate? Now, I know what you're thinking. That's a pretty good Aussie accent. Crikey!
You call that a knife? This is a knife.
I'd buy that for $1 do, I would.
Surprise, motherfucker! And whoops! Crikey. Clever girl.
Hors d'oeuvres. Beer. Foster's. Australian for beer.
Okay. The theme of man playing God, guys, come on now. Do I even? Frankenstein, Island of Dr. Moreau, every mad scientist ever, not to mention splitting the atom to unleash another terrible lizard in Godzilla. If you can't see for yourself that Jurassic Park has the horror genre literally woven into its DNA, then you need another peek under the microscope. That or better taste. Nature run amok. This is right there with that class of fear fiction. Them, 1954, giant radiated ants, Hitchcock's The Birds, 1990s arachnophobia. Now, obviously, Jurassic Park is head and shoulders above those. I'm just saying that there certainly is a precedent of animals running wild that are deeply rooted in horror, and that's not even mentioning the obvious one, which is Jaws. So terrible lizards aren't exempt from that list just because it's a movie for families. When we think about 90s horror entertainment that sought to emulate Jurassic Park, I mean, you can't deny the influence that this film had, not just on blockbusters and CGI and summer films, but think about within its own decade, other movies that were inspired by it, which were also horror. The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Relic, Dino Crisis games, Lake Placid, Godzilla 1988. All right, admittedly, the less said about that one, the better.
That's a lot of fish.
But you get where I'm going with this. But the point remains. Another seemingly forgotten aspect of the fear factor, which flies in the face and subverts the action. Let's think of the shotgun. Just that trusty weapon in the context of this film. Now, when do you see the shotgun? You see the Aussie holding that weapon in the very beginning with the kennel scene. And what good does it do him? Obviously, it doesn't go after the Raptor. Doesn't go after him. It goes after one of the other security guards. But he's still unable to subdue the Raptor with shotgun in hand. Everybody else, if I'm not mistaken, had tasers, whereas he was armed with that weapon. Next, same character, the same Aussie. He's on the Raptor hunt. So you think that if anybody, he's the expert. He's got the gun. He sees the Raptor before it sees him. So you think that he'll at least take down one of these. But no, he's the one that turns out to be the one that's being hunted. Finally, as you eagle-eyed viewers saw, Grant unloads 3 rounds through the window of the security room before the Raptor gets in to attack and prowl the remaining 4 humans. So it's almost like the shotgun here, the weapon, is used as like false sense of security. Because if you think that one of these characters has them, it's either useless or it wears out its use even while it's fired at the intended targets. And the gun is always used with the Raptors. Now, you could say, obviously, it wouldn't do much good against a T-Rex, but the fact that the Raptors are much smaller, you would think it would be able to take down all of them. But guys, 3 straight scenes, the horror completely overwhelms what should be the action, because I mean, come on, if you're talking an action movie, what better plot device can you use than a gun? But you get false senses of security with it, because it never takes down any of the dinosaurs here, especially one of the most dangerous one, the pack hunter Raptor. Another thing I would like people to consider, that this film, you could say, oh, it's made for families, and I advised before, don't fall for the whimsical theme song of this movie. Because that's like, is it iconic? Absolutely. But it serves as window dressing to mask the fact that this is a horror movie. When you think of 90s PG horror, keep something in mind. That element, that category of fear fiction was just one of 2 metrics that 90s had over the 80s decade of horror. The other one being anthology. I think that 90s anthologies blow 80s anthologies out of the water. So what do I mean? Films like The Addams Family, Hocus Pocus, The Witches. You can slot Jurassic Park right up in there. And all of those movies constitute as horror. And like Hocus Pocus just got announced for a trilogy. They're having another. Beetlejuice was admittedly 80s, but you get the point. Just because the fan base might be children, that doesn't disqualify something like Jurassic Park from being entered into the pantheon of creature features and especially horror films. And you know, there are keep something else in mind. This will be my final point. There are absolutely films that aren't your typical horror fare, the way that we would normally think of them, that are absolutely part of the genre. What did I just mention? 2 decades, 80s and 90s. All right, let's look at the 80s. They Live, John Carpenter's subversive film. You can't tell me that, really looking at that movie, it's not out and out horror. Yeah, the aliens didn't look freakish, but you can't deny that is a bona fide horror film. Another one, Stephen King's The Dead Zone, which is directed by another prominent horror filmmaker, David Cronenberg. Are you going to deny that those films are part of fear fiction? Now let's fast forward to the 90s. X-Files. Who's going to say that doesn't belong to horror? Another horror treasured horror film, Cube. Technically, like, it can be seen more thriller, but it's absolutely incorporated into horror. It's more on the fringe, I would say. And guess what? With all those points, that proves that Jurassic Park is absolutely, without question, a horror film. And now our watch has ended. So, in addition to the trivia and just general commentary, one thing that I like to do with Tramadom is give recommendations of similar films in case anyone is interested, or just rewatching this movie, or if you're watching it for the first time, gives you some kind of enticement to watch movies like it. So, considering that this is a blockbuster, I thought I would give you a blockbuster recommendation list, which is broken down into 90s nostalgia and similar creature features. So, on the 90s nostalgia, I do think that Jumanji makes the perfect companion piece to Jurassic Park. Also, Congo, a similar Michael Crichton film or book. Tremors, and Independence Day. On the creature feature side, I would serve this as a companion piece with Jaws, of course, Aliens, naturally, Lake Placid, and Deep Blue Sea.
Presenting the 100 scariest movie moments, a countdown of the greatest moments of cinema shock.
I and my studio did not design scary dinosaurs. We designed real dinosaurs.
I believed those dinosaurs were real. You know, I know they're not, and yet somehow that movie put it in my mind that humans can coexist with dinosaurs.
We built a Tyrannosaurus Rex that was 40 feet long from the tip of his nose to the tip of his tail, that weighed 18,000 pounds, 9 tons, had something like 350 horsepower, was extremely powerful, and it could act.
I love that the raptors end up being the scariest part because they're sort of slimy, you know, they work in groups and they have calls to one another. It's so much creepier when something's intelligent and evil.
They were the meat eaters. They were without conscience. These were the sharks of Jurassic Park. These were not, well, maybe we can talk to him. These guys are going to kill you.
So, mark your calendars and say your prayers. I've been Inkarnate, offering a word of caution. Fear the worst, so long you recognize who's best. You're resigned to your fate? Time to subscribe to your fears.
Warn your friends. Warn everyone.